Hi and welcome to my Playhouse. And today I got a request. Someone asked if I could do a video about the IBM X3550 Model 2. And yeah, it's not as if I haven't done a video about that server. I have. I even did a search on it just to make sure that I could remember most of the stuff about it. And my videos came up, and sometimes it is kind of funny when I Google something and my own videos come up, and I know that that dude does not know what I'm asking. Because, yeah. But of course I can do a video on the IBM X3550 Model 2, which is an older server. IBM announced this in 2009, so by today's standards it's an old gentleman, but it's really not that terrible. It's a one-use server, which does do so that it's a bit more noisy because the fans in there are those tiny little ones, and to cool the server they have to run really fast, and running fast means noise. On the front here we have the rack release buttons. This when you install this in a rack, you put it on rails, and the rails can be pulled out. And to not have it glide out of the rack all by itself, there's a release button here. It also gives us the model number, and this is the, well, it's an IBM 7946, and this one is the -22G. And the last three letters here, the 22G, that tells us something about what this server came with when it was made, what processors it had, maybe what RAM it came with. This was a standard server. It had some standard configuration when it was delivered from the factory. This one has room for 6 hard drives in the front, 2.5-inch hard drives, and there is other models available. There is one with, I believe it has 2 3.5-inch hard drives, but this one has, well, it has the 2.5. Just for fun and giggles, I went out to I found a couple of hard drives. These are 100 gigabyte SSDs, and just to make it look better I thought, let's pop those in. So popping those in, so it looks more done, right? The other ones here are the fillers, again to make sure that the air gets some restrictions, because if there's no fillers in this hole, and we have 2 hard drives over here that becomes really warm, well, the air doesn't really want to go that way when there is a big blotchy gap right there. So these fillers are quite important to keep your stuff cool. So if you don't have them, I will very much recommend my own shop. I do have some of these for sale in my Playhouse little shop, my Playhouse shop. This is an older server, and we can see that because it has a CD-ROM drive / DVD drive. That is not common anymore. And it has some white stuff on here. It has had a label at some point, so But DVD-ROM, and it says something about rewritable. I don't know. Who needs that? I don't. And then we have, I think there's a sensor or a thing in here. It has some little things that it does something, and there is this thing to protect the power on button. So now it's easy to press it, no problem whatsoever. Slide this over like that. You need a very pointy finger to get in there. It's still possible, but a pen would be very much preferable. They have some LEDs. I can see that there's some network and some. Then there's the light tower button. If you press that, it will light up blue on the front and on the back, so that it's easier to find this server on the back. And it is a real problem if you have a rack full of servers and they're in production, and you need to go around the back and disconnect the right server, and the label is on the front. I can assure you that the blue button helps you a lot. Even, you will go and check the rack number, which is located out here, and see, oh, this one is in rack unit 22, and go around the back and make sure that rack unit 22 is the one that you're disconnecting. But it really helps if it also lights up blue. Gives you a lot of confidence in what you're doing. This one has a display that pops out, the light path diagnostics panel here, where it has a bunch of LEDs that will tell you if something is wrong. It will light up with the log. If the log file is full, temperature, fan, yeah, you get the drift. Rate controller, PCI, memory, CPU. That's a little LED for most of the stuff. So yeah, very handy when there is an error. And the last little bit over here, we have a VGA connection. Very handy to have that on the front of the server and one on the back of the server, which we will also get to. Then we have two USB ports, and when you have the VGA connection on the front, it's very, very nice to also have the USB connections, because otherwise you can connect your screen here, but mouse and keyboard, well, they would be in the back, and that wouldn't make much sense. So yeah, these three connections are really great. I do actually have a very cool keyboard. I want to show you that one. Here is the keyboard, and it's a USB keyboard, and it's very handy. It's an IBM keyboard. It's a Danish keyboard, so we have our three weird signs here. If you want to learn some Danish, it's A, Ø, og Å, E, Ø, and O. I said that in Danish, so I better translate that. Which is very nice when you're a Danish person and has to write something on a keyboard. Most of the server stuff that we do is always English, because if there is some kind of error, well, let me just admit that the error correcting and finding someone who has had the same error before you is way easier in English. But it's very nice that it has it. But the most important thing is that it has the mouse and the track thing here, so you don't have to connect both a mouse and a keyboard. You just have the keyboard. You can have only one USB connection and you're good to go, and you can control everything from this keyboard. But it has a special feature on the back. Right here, it has two other USB connections, so when you plug in the keyboard, you can also plug in an external mouse. You wouldn't need it, but you could. But your USB key with your ISO files can go in right there. So if you have a server with a very limited amount of USB connections, well, this keyboard can help you out a great deal. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. And when I came across it, my colleague was gonna throw it out. I saved it, so very cool keyboard. So I've been making YouTube videos long enough, so I know that you guys are gonna be asking what model number is it and can I get it? And well, here are all the model numbers, and if you can get it, I don't know, but there it is. SK8835. Oh, it's a Lenovo. Cool. I thought it was an IBM. So very handy to have those on the front. DVD drive, not really much used anymore. Well, there's room for it, so it's nice to have it available. Then there's the release button on the other side, so let's turn it around. So on the back here, we have a PCI slot in here. It's a low profile one, and over further that way we have a full profile one. But we also have a daughter board down here where you can put in some network connections. We have the first port here, and that's the management, the IMM. IBM changed the name from the previous model of this server to this model of this server, and instead of calling it the RSA2, suddenly it was the IMM1. I have never been a fan of that, changing names all the time, and on that regard I'll actually call out Hewlett-Packard for doing a better job and always calling it the ILO adapter, where IBM and Lenovo has been changing names for this adapter and management port so many times that I have lost count. Especially when you talk Blade servers and other servers, they fuck around with the names. Moving along, we have two 1 gigabit network connections. Very nice, 1 and 2. And they have all the LEDs to show what the network connections is doing, if it has a connection, if it's transferring data and stuff. Then we have that VGA connection on the back, handy. Then we have 3 LEDs that gives us some indication if the server is powered on. If it the blue LED is the middle one, if you press the light tower on the front. And then we have the exclamation mark. If there's something wrong with the server, it will light up. Then we have a serial connection never used that much. Then we have two USB connection that goes very well together with that VGA connection when you have to control the server. And then we have some spider webs here. It must have been a web server. We have two power supplies over here, and these are kind of standard. This server only had one size fits all. They're very long. This is like, it's like Star Wars when the big Star Destroyer comes in at the start. Just keeps going and going and going and going, and then it's done. So yeah, these are 675 watt power supplies. So yeah, they're long. It has a redundant solution for those, of course, as servers does, and it tells us here if the AC is good, if the DC is good, and in the bottom if there's something wrong. They could have done with less than that. I don't think if one of those two isn't good, well, this one is probably bad. But I must admit, I have never had a bad power supply on this model of server, so they must have done something right with those. We also have a label up here which tells us that this is made in Canada. Is that right? It's probably made all over the place. Hungary. Oh, it's made in Hungary. Okay. It also says that this server is from the 24th of July 2009. So it's very nifty, very handy to know when this server is from. So from the 2U server and to this 1U server, there's a difference in how you open it. It has a blue button here, and it has another blue thing here, and it's meant that you use your fingers. You press the boot button and you press the cover back, and there is a couple of locking mechanisms here that slides down and grabs onto the top of the power supplies over here, and we are in the server. Bargain Hardware, which I am affiliated with, they are selling this server at the moment. They have I think they had 17 or 18 of them in stock, and they're not too expensive. You can actually configure a good server like this for less than £100. Definitely available and not too expensive. In here we have, usually I look at the LED here and it tells you about all the information. I'm gonna jump over this today because you might have seen the other video, and if you haven't seen that, you should go see the other video because I'm pretty sure that I go over that in that video. So we have two processors, processor 1 and processor 2. This server, when it came out, it could do the Intel Xeon 5500 series. Most of them. The Model 2 can do CPUs up to about 95 watts. There is a few that is at 130 watts, and if you try and put those in, it will be complaining. There is some CPUs that was not available when Intel released this. Intel made some special CPUs, not for this server, but for Apple products or for special delivery and some weird stuff. And we'll get to those in just a little bit, because along the way, when the Intel came out with their new series of CPUs, which was the Intel Xeon 5600 series, they were actually compatible with the server, but the server needed some microcode to be able to manage those new CPUs. And if you firmware update this server to the latest and the greatest, you will have those microcodes. And if you get this server, you can download all the drivers and all the stuff from IBM's webpage free of charge. You need to have a login, but that's free too. You create a login and then you can download everything. So they're not holding anything back. They stand by their products even this many years later. So that is cool. But when the server is firmware updated, you can then put in the X5600 series, also up to about 95 watts. I have though found that there is one CPU, and that is the Intel Xeon X3679, which is a 6-core 2.3 GHz CPU. That will also work in this server. I've not tried it on this 1U server, but I have tried it on the 3U server, the X3650 Model 2. But as those two servers are so much alike, I will more or less put my good reputation on that sense that it will also work on this one. They are so similar that they share the same system board, so I think it's good to go. But that CPU is just about the fastest CPU that you can get for this server, and in the CPU benchmark it scores about 7,000. So 2 of those, you can kind of say that your server is at 15,000, which is as much as a good AMD CPU. The one that I have in my tiny Lenovo in here is just a little bit faster, not much. But that one was bought last year, and this one is from 2009. That they use quite a bit more power than the new stuff. I believe that CPU uses 115 watts, so that would be over 200 watts driving just the CPU. Okay, in here we have the small fans, the ones that I just told you were kind of noisy. So it's a double fan solution. There's a fan on the front here, and there's another fan on the back. So they help each other to blow as much air through, and makes a hell of a noise when they want to. So they can be swapped out. Yeah, I believe they're hot pluggable. They are red, so red is hot pluggable. Orange thing, red, orange. Blue is not hot pluggable. You can take the whole cage out, can you? How does that work? I've never tried that. We need to try that then. Let's take all the fans out. And this plastic cover is covering up the RAM. And then there's a blue thing here. How does that work? But why? Ah, okay, it's when you have to slide the system board out. You have to take the fans out, slide these up, and then you can pop the system board forward. Okay, we get smarter every day, don't we? Yeah, didn't make sense. Down here there's a couple of dip switches. I'm sure they're in the documentation if you need those for anything. Sometimes you get a system board where someone has put on the system administrator password and you can't get into the BIOS, and well, then you need stuff like that. There we are. Then we have some RAM. This server can do, how many blocks are there? There are 4, 8, 16 blocks of memory. And when the server got out, the largest block that you could buy, and you would have to turn in your firstborn, was an 8 GB block. These are 4 GB blocks. These are very affordable. I was looking at bargain hardware for, and these was about 2.4 pounds, I believe they were priced at. So very affordable for a 4 GB memory block. So, but when the server was new, the maximum amount of RAM that you could put in it was 128 GB of memory. So that would be 16 times 8. But I found out in a video that it can also do 16 GB blocks. So this server can do 256 GB of memory if you put in 16 GB blocks in here, and it works. I did it. I have the video to show it. We have a RAID controller, and the RAID controller is on this tiny little PCB, which has room for a USB connection here. So if you're running VMware ESXi, an older version, you can put in your USB key here to boot your ESXi, and that works great. It's a great solution, and I was a very big fan when I found that inside of the server. The previous model of the server, which was the X3550 Model 1, it wasn't called Model 1 to start with, but it did not have an internal USB connection, so this one was the first one that had that. It's a PCI riser slot, an X8, and they have made room for the RAID controller over here, and this is I believe it's a M10 something, this one, BRM10, I forget. It's one of the better RAID controllers. It actually does some RAID. It can do SAS and SATA. It has 8 connections, so it uses those connections to go over here to the backplane of those 6 drives over here. On the system board there is also a SAS connection here, so you can not have this and just use that one, but I don't believe there is any RAID. And in some instances, I don't know if it's true with this server, it will only do SATA. This is a low profile PCI card. I do believe that in the 3U server this is a full height. But with the RAM there's just not room for it, so it's a tiny one, but it's an X16. Only graphics cards was using that at that point when this server was new, and no one was putting in graphics cards in servers. Underneath here we have room for the data card, a LOM card is what they are usually called today, and you can get 2 extra network connections. This generation of servers, that would be 1 gigabit network cards that you can get out the back here. I actually have some of those in my shop. Not much of a graphics card that we can fit in here, and we are limited to this PCI slot is 25 watts, so anything that uses more than 25 watts is not a good idea to put in there. Over here we have a little blue thing, and this is because the IMM in this server, you had to buy this key to open up additional features, and this was bloody expensive when you were purchasing a new server and you wanted this key. It helped a lot if you were buying a lot of servers and if you forced some competition, but if you just wanted one of these, it was close to 200 euros for this stupid key. Nowadays you can buy it on eBay for next to nothing. A few euros and it's yours. So yeah, but you need those features. It's definitely, you need it. And we have the other riser card, also an X16. You can put a little bit bigger graphics card in there, full height, not very long. So that is nice. So a very important thing with this RAID controller, I turned the server around so we get it from the other side. This RAID controller is limited to 2 terabyte hard drives. So you can put in 2 terabytes. It's not a big deal with these 2.5-inch hard drives that this one has, but if you had 3.5-inch hard drives, nowadays you might have some very big hard drives in the front here, and this RAID controller is limited to 2 terabytes. And you need to know that, because otherwise you might be wasting some good hard disk space or buying the wrong thing. It is very possible to take the next generation RAID controller from the M3 servers and put in here. I have done that, the M5015, which is a really good RAID controller, and they have also become very affordable, and they can do larger than 2 terabyte hard drives. So this one is too old for large hard drives, so very important to know that before you go out shopping. The RAM is DDR3 RAM, so, and it has IBM numbers over here. It's real IBM RAM, so made by Hynix. So to get the airflow right in servers like this, they put in these plastic things to make sure that the air goes where it needs to go. So never throw these out, and when you put them in you can kind of see what they have been thinking. So we have like 6 fans over here, and so they're kind of redundant for each other. These 2 fans, their job is to cool this CPU and whatever is here, and some small components on the system board, and it splits that. Half of the air goes under and half of the air goes over and cools this. And if there's a tiny GPU or something that needs cooling here, well, it gets a good airflow down here. Over here with the RAID controller, there's no fans here. Weird, right? But if we go further back, we see that those 2 power supplies are here. And if we pop the power supplies out, we can see that the power supply has a fan here. So the power supply is pulling air through here, and with the redundant power supplies, they're sucking air through here, so that's cooling down the RAID controller, and then it cools down the power supply. The next 2 fans up here, they're cooling the RAM, and a little bit back here, not much. The 2 fans over here are cooling the CPU number 1 and the chipset, which I believe is there, and the daughter board, and if there's a smaller PCI board here. And so there's like 4 sets of fans that cools different stuff in the server, and that's why this plastic thing is important, because those 2 fans are cooling that stuff. And if the plastic thing is not here, the air might go weird ways around here, and some engineer has been working overtime to figure this out for us. So would I recommend this server? It's an old boy. I'm not gonna be recommending this server for your 24/7 running server all the time. I think it draws too much power compared to what it can do. If you want a really fast server, you need to put in some really power hungry CPUs. Those 2 times 115 watts, that they make it a really bad deal to run this year round. And even though they have some power saving and stuff, 2009, those power saving things wasn't that good then, so it will still be using too much power when it's not doing anything. So for that, it's not good. It's too power hungry by today's standards, and especially after the power prices has skyrocketed. Playing around server in the weekend, it's a great server. Messing around, putting in some RAM, installing some VMwares, installing some Linux, some Proxmox, great server. Try to find a graphics card that you can pass through in VMware in this. Challenge, could be fun to get that up and running. Just to say that you've done it, scratch that from your list, and you can configure a rather well-spec'd server of this model at Bargain Hardware. And if you use the coupon code MyPlayHouse, small letters, you get an extra 5% off. And yes, I am affiliated with Bargain Hardware, so do keep that in mind. But for £100 you could spec out a really nice server, dual CPUs, RAM, network cards, maybe even a couple of discs. It's a very affordable toy to play around with, and it depends a lot of where you are in the world, what you consider to be funny money, that you can just, it's good fun, we'll try that. But I do expect that a lot of my audience will consider £100 as being funny money. And getting an older server like this and firmware updating it, making sure that all the drivers are on the latest and the greatest, making network connections to your network and stuff, well, there's good hours of challenges in this. It's like computer games. Why do you play computer? You play it to get to the next level. So a server like this is like a computer game. You buy the server and you try all the things that you can do out of it. Can it do server 2019? Can it do Red Hat blah blah blah? I don't know much about Red Hat. Probably can. Can it do Proxmox? What version of ESXi can I install on it? So on and so forth. Challenges. So for that, it's a really good server. There's lots of challenges. All the components that IBM put in this are really standard and really well covered with drivers and stuff. So it's a really good server in that regard. You can definitely put on any version of Microsoft server, at least up to 2019, without any issues whatsoever, and it will just more or less find everything. In that regard, it's really good. I've never had much issues with IBM servers in that regard. So mostly I've played with the 3650s. This one is the 3550, but as said, it's the same system board, it's the same layout, it's just half the thickness. So yeah, I would recommend this server for playing around with. It's really affordable. If I could ask you to give this video a like though, that is always nice. And I can also see that a lot of people joined me over at Twitter. I would like to thank them very much for that. And then I can also see that a lot of my patrons are not watching the Patreon videos. Why? You paid for it. Go watch the Patreon videos. I make them for you every week. So Patreon. And other than that, thank you very much for watching my videos. Do subscribe to my channel so that you can see me again, and have a really nice day. Bye bye. Why did I come all the way down here? That's weird.